Chapter 4 of 10 Years Later. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 10 Years Later by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter 4. Malicorne et Manicamp. The introduction of these two new personages into this history and that mysterious affinity of names and sentiments merit some attention on the part of both historian and reader. We will then enter into some details concerning Messieurs Malicorne et Manicamp. Malicorne, we know, had made the journey to Orleans in search of the brevet destined for Mademoiselle de Montalais, the arrival of which had produced such a strong feeling at the castle of Blois. At that moment, Monsieur de Manicamp was at Orleans. A singular person was this Monsieur de Manicamp, a very intelligent young fellow, always poor, always needy, although he dipped his hand freely into the purse of Monsieur le Comte de Guiche, one of the best furnished purses of the period. Monsieur le Comte de Guiche had, as the companion of his boyhood, this de Manicamp, a poor gentleman, vassal born, of the house of Gramont. Monsieur de Manicamp, with his tact and talent, had created himself a revenue in the opulent family of the celebrated Marechal. From his infancy he had, with calculation beyond his age, lent his mane and complaisance to the follies of the Comte de Guiche. If his noble companion had stolen some fruit destined for Madame la Marechale, or if he had broken a mirror, or put out a dog's eye, Manicamp declared himself guilty of the crime committed, and received the punishment, which was not made the milder for falling on the innocent. But this was the way this system of abnegation was paid for. Instead of wearing such mean habiliments as his paternal fortunes entitled him to, he was able to appear brilliant, superb, like a young noble of 50,000 livres a year. It was not that he was mean in character or humble in spirit. No, he was a philosopher, or rather he had the indifference, the apathy, the obstinacy, which banished from men every sentiment of the supernatural. His sole ambition was to spend money. But in this respect, the worthy Monsieur de Manicamp was a gulf. 3 or 4 times every year he drained the Comte de Guiche, and when the Comte de Guiche was thoroughly drained, when he had turned out his pockets and his purse before him, when he declared that it would be at least a fortnight before paternal munificence would refill those pockets and that purse, Manicamp lost all his energy. He went to bed, remained there, ate nothing, and sold his handsome clothes, under the pretense that, remaining in bed, he did not want them. During this prostration of mind and strength, the purse of the Comte de Guiche was getting full again, and when once filled, overflowed into that of de Manicamp, who bought new clothes, dressed himself again, and recommenced the same life he had followed before. The mania of selling his new clothes for a quarter of what they were worth had rendered our hero sufficiently celebrated in Orleans, a city where, in general, we should be puzzled to say why he came to pass his days of penitence. Provincial debauch, petit maître of 600 livres a year, shared the fragments of his opulence. Among the admirers of these splendid toilettes, our friend Malicorne was conspicuous. He was the son of a syndic of the city, of whom Monsieur de Conde, always needy as a Deconde, often borrowed money at enormous interest. Monsieur Malicorne kept the paternal money chest, that is to say, that in those times of easy morals he had made for himself, by following the example of his father and lending at high interest for short terms, a revenue of 1,800 livres, without reckoning 600 livres furnished by the generosity of the syndic, so that Malicorne was the king of the gay youth of Orleans, having 2,400 livres to scatter, squander, and waste on follies of every kind. But quite contrary to Manicamp, Malicorne was terribly ambitious. He loved from ambition. He spent money out of ambition. He would have ruined himself for ambition. Malicorne had determined to rise at whatever price it might cost, and for this, whatever price it did cost, he had given himself a mistress and a friend. The mistress, Mademoiselle de Montalais, was cruel as regarded love, but she was of noble family, and that was sufficient for Malicorne. The friend had little or no friendship, but he was the favorite of the Comte de Guiche, himself the friend of Monsieur, the king's brother, and that was sufficient for Malicorne. Only, in the chapter of charges, Mademoiselle de Montalais cost per annum, ribbons, gloves, and sweets, 1,000 livres. De Manicamp cost, money lent, never returned, from 12 to 1,500 livres per annum, so that there was nothing left for Malicorne. Ah, yes, we are mistaken. There was left the paternal strong box. He employed a mode of proceeding which he preserved with the most profound secrecy, and which consisted in advancing to himself, from the coffers of the syndic, half a dozen years' profits, that is to say, 15,000 livres, swearing to himself, observe, quite to himself, to repay this deficiency as soon as an opportunity should present itself. The opportunity was expected to be the concession of a good post in the household of Monsieur, when that household would be established in the period of his marriage. This juncture had arrived, and the household was about to be established. A good post in the family of a prince of the blood, when it is given by the credit and on the recommendation of a friend, like Comte de Guiche, is worth at least 12,000 livres per annum. And by the means which Monsieur Malicorne had taken to make his revenues fructify, 12,000 livres might rise to 20,000. Then, once an incumbent of this post, he would marry Mademoiselle de Montalais. Mademoiselle de Montalais, of a half-noble family, not only would be dowered, but would ennoble Malicorne. But in order that Mademoiselle de Montalais, who had not a large patrimonial fortune, although an only daughter, should be suitably dowered, it was necessary that she should belong to some great princess, as prodigal as the dowager Madame was covetous. And in order that the wife should not be of one party, while the husband belonged to another, the situation which presents serious inconveniences, particularly with characters like those of the future consorts, Malicorne had imagined the idea of making the central point of the union the household of Monsieur, the king's brother. Mademoiselle de Montalais would be maid of honor to Madame, Monsieur Malicorne would be officer to Monsieur. It is plain the plan was formed by a clear head. It is plain also that it had been bravely executed. Malicorne had asked Manicamp to ask a brevet of maid of honor of the Comte de Guiche, and the Comte de Guiche had asked this brevet of Monsieur, who had signed it without hesitation. The constructive plan of Malicorne, for we may well suppose that the combination of mind as active as his were not confined to the present, but extended to the future. The constructive plan of Malicorne, we say, was this: to obtain entrance into the household of Madame Henrietta for a woman devoted to himself, who was intelligent, young, handsome, and intriguing; to learn, by means of this woman, all the feminine secrets of the young household, whilst he, Malicorne, and his friend Manicamp, should, between them, know all the male secrets of the young community. It was by these means that a rapid and splendid fortune might be acquired at one and the same time. Malicorne was a vile name. He who bore it had too much wit to conceal this truth from himself. But an estate might be purchased, and Malicorne of some place, or even de Malicorne itself, for short, would ring more nobly on the ear. It is not improbable that a most aristocratic origin might be hunted up by the heralds for this name of Malicorne. Might it not come from some estate where a bull with mortal horns had caused some great misfortune and baptized the soil with the blood it had spilt? Certes, this plan was presented itself bristling with difficulties. But the greatest of all was Mademoiselle de Montalais herself. Capricious, variable, close, giddy, free, prudish, a virgin armed with claws, Aragon stained with grapes, she sometimes overturned, with a single dash of her white fingers, or with a single puff from her laughing lips, the edifice which had exhausted Malicorne's patience for a month. Love apart, Malicorne was happy, but this love, which he could not help feeling, he had the strength to conceal with care, persuaded at the least relaxing of the ties by which he had bound his Protean female, the demon would overthrow and laugh at him. He humbled his mistress by disdaining her. Burning with desire, when she advanced to tempt him, he had the art to appear ice, persuaded that if he opened his arms, she would run away laughing at him. On her side, Montalais believed she did not love Malicorne, whilst, on the contrary, in reality she did. Malicorne repeated to her so often his protestation of indifference that she finished sometimes by believing him, and then she believed she detested Malicorne. If she tried to bring him back by coquetry, Malicorne played the coquette better than she could. But what made Montalais hold to Malicorne in an indissoluble fashion was that Malicorne always came cram full of fresh news from the court and the city. Malicorne always brought to Blois a fashion, a secret, or perfume that Malicorne never asked for a meeting, but, on the contrary, required to be supplicated to receive the favors he burned to obtain. On her side, Montalais was no miser with stories. By her means, Malicorne learnt all that passed at Blois in the family of the dowager Madame, and he related to Manicamp tales that made him ready to die with laughing, which the latter, out of idleness, took ready-made to Monsieur de Guiche, who carried them to Monsieur. Such, in 2 words, was the woof of the petty interests and the petty conspiracies which united Blois with Orleans, and Orleans with Paris, and which was about to bring into the last-named city where she was to produce so great a revolution, the poor little La Valliere, who was far from suspecting, as she returned joyfully, leaning on the arm of her mother, for what a strange future she was reserved. As to the good man Malicorne, we speak of the Saint-Die of Orleans. He did not see more clearly into the present than others did into the future, and had no suspicion as he walked every day, between 3 and 5 o'clock after his dinner, upon the Place Saint-Catherine, in his grey coat, cut after the fashion of Louis XIII, and his cloth shoes with great knots of ribbon, that it was he who was paying for all these bursts of laughter, all those stolen kisses, all those whisperings, all those little keepsakes, and all those bubble projects which formed a chain of 45 leagues in length, from the Palais of Blois to the Palais Royal. End of chapter 4. Recording by Torah.